So it's really nice to be here, and I am so excited to be presenting this information and to have had this opportunity to work with Anna Maria in this capacity to really understand our own stories a little bit better and how they have worked together. We both found a lot of common ground in the work that we've been doing here in New York City. And historically, the barriers to entry in cycling, especially for women, have been pretty high. So what Anna Maria and I have been doing for the last few years is really working to build ideas and community that breaks down these barriers and builds community for women and really for everybody. And these are just the examples of the projects we've been working on. And basically what we're going to be doing tonight is telling you our stories and a little bit of personal advice for how you guys can make this awesome sport a bigger part of your lives.
So my name is Anna Maria Wolf. I run a site called Pretty Damn Fast, and I own a bike shop in South Williamsburg called Sun and Air. I am the most accidental cyclist. I never imagined that I would describe myself that way. I came to New York to work in fashion and have worked as a fashion editor for the past 13 years. And I quit smoking after having smoked for 18 years and was looking to be more active, but it was hard kind of starting starting from scratch. And I got my first bike kind of on a whim, and I almost saw it as sort of a fashion accessory. I mean, you can see it here. It came with a little basket, so my little fluffy dog T-Rex could ride with me on the weekends, kind of just around Brooklyn. But I never really saw it as anything more than that, and my brain couldn't even imagine something beyond that. The bike was just, it was going to be a very minuscule part of my life, but totally fell in love, and little by little, my commutes grew and grew. I just always wanted to be on my bike, and eventually I booked a costuming gig in Long Island City, and so my commutes became really, really long. And I knew that I wanted to kind of see how far I could go with this whole bike thing. So when the film wrapped, I sold that bike and I hired a coach, and I started kind of threw myself head first into racing. I was not very good at bicycle racing, but it was the sort of next step, and in kind of seeing how far this could go from a sport and physical standpoint, but also in a lot of ways it was me searching for community, because I came to this activity kind of alone, and I was just trying to connect with other people that rode, and it was hard. I didn't have a bike friend, I didn't know anybody, and so this was my kind of way to reach out. So yeah, then I finally joined a team, and it was awesome to be in this larger group of people. It was a co-ed team, and so there were things about that were not so great, but finally I had kind of my bike family was starting to come together, and yeah, how bummed I was that the uniforms are orange and white. I'm just an all black everything New Yorker, and this was definitely a point of pride, but that kit just did not, was not for me.
You also look cold.
Yeah, it was freezing. So, you know, at this point, the bike had turned into something so big for me. It was a part of my everyday life. It was taking me on adventures that I never in my wildest dreams could have imagined, and it brought so much joy and fulfillment to my life, and kind of balanced everything, and at the same time, it was this huge thing for me, but I wasn't connecting with other people, and this was all kind of pre-Instagram, which is kind of hard to mentally wrap my head around now, but that sort of, this was in a sort of a different era of social media, and so I, you know, kind of going back to my skills as a fashion editor, I think that I started combing through the internet for community, for other women that inspired me, for places I wanted to ride, things that I wanted to do, you know, trying to figure out what the heck cyclocross was. I couldn't find it all in one place, but I gradually started to put together a Tumblr, and that was pretty damn fast, and eventually I just thought, well, you know, rather than sifting through the internet trying to find this inspiration, I should really just try and create the content myself, and have it be a resource that isn't just, you know, looking at cool pictures, but actually serves a social purpose and is connecting people and connecting to athletes that I wanted to kind of model after and adventures that I wanted to go on. So Pretty Damn Fast was born, and I wanted it to look completely different than, you know, what I was just able to find. This particular story was a collaboration between Rafa and the printmaker Liberty, and you know, Rafa did their own release with it, but I wanted to showcase what I thought was a really cool collection in a really cool setting, on a model, Laura Solis, who inspired me. She was a TA organizer from the Bronx. I would shoot, you know, this is a reflective story shot on the stairs at Fort Greene that I like to run on, featuring some cool New York brands that have reflectivity. I shot it on models that rode, that were athletes that were inspiring me, people in my community that I was really impressed with. And then sometimes I straight up just stole my ideas straight from fashion. Like, this is totally pulled from a Barney's catalog that I styled, and I just borrowed the same sort of visual language and iconography from a fashion catalog, but using it to showcase cycling gear. And again, this could have been a story that I did for Teen Vogue, but this was our holiday gift guide of all the stuff that I really wished I was getting for Christmas that year. And then this is another story that I really liked. You know, it could have been Hattie Stewart for Elle magazine, but this was a cyclist illustrator doing a multimedia piece featuring a cool line of apparel from New Zealand, and yeah, just really awesome, powerful cyclists doing cool stuff, and showcasing it in a way that's a little bit different than your traditional big brand kind of imagery. So at this point, I started working more frequently with brands who maybe knew me as a fashion stylist, but wanted to reach the cycling community and women that rode. So I came on board with Levi's Commuter to roll out their women's commuter collection, and collaborated a lot with brands like Cannondale and GT to roll out women's campaigns and create imagery that I think connected with women on a deeper, more emotional level. I got a chance to speak at South by Southwest and host rides in Mexico City and Texas, and it was really cool to sort of start seeing my fashion world and my bike world kind of coming together a little bit closer. And about this time, I started working a little more frequently at my husband's bike shop. It's called King Cog, and it's in Williamsburg. And while I was working at that shop, I got the chance to apply for a scholarship to go to bike mechanic school. The scholarship is done by Quality Bicycle Products, and they do it every single year. And if anybody is at all interested in learning how to be a mechanic, I strongly encourage you to apply for this scholarship because it's amazing. And going to bike school was a really life-changing experience for me. I've always worked with my hands, and I loved bikes, but a huge part of how they worked was a mystery to me, and being able to actually fix bikes and kind of hold my own a little bit more when it came to reviewing bikes, it was a really powerful experience. Additionally, this course breaks down how shops are run, and when I finished that course, I had a much better idea of the bike shop as an actual business that you can get involved in. So that's when I decided to open my own bike shop. I came back from bike school, and we'd always been looking for a place to move my husband's original bike shop, and then we found this amazing corner space like a block away from the entrance to the Williamsburg Bridge, and it just seemed like an awesome place for a bike shop, and a place for a bike shop that was really different than the shop we already had. So we started this as kind of a community-focused bike shop, focused on city riding, and we have a coffee shop inside of it. It has a bike-up coffee window, which is really nice. Yeah, so this shop has been welcoming to all different kinds of rides and activities and workshops, and you can just drop in for a coffee and whatever you want. You don't have to buy a bike, and we host all kinds of special events and women's rides, and it's been amazing to see this kind of online community that I started with pretty damn fast finally have a brick and mortar community space to come together, and so I think that's it.
I guess it's my turn. That's one of the stories I got to learn about Anna Maria working on this presentation, which was very cool. So this is me. This is basically where it all started. I always had a bike as a kid. I rode it around the neighborhood with my friends, and that was about it. Cycling as a sport or a serious hobby came later in life. But growing up, I played soccer and team sports, but was never an athlete, didn't consider myself an athlete. I got to high school and picked up a nice smoking habit when I was 15, and didn't break that until bikes came into my life. And it wasn't even until college that I even recognized cycling as part of my worldview. I was one of those people who always owned a bike until I got a car, and that was the end of that. So definitely didn't have a history of it until I got to college, and I ended up in Flagstaff, Arizona, at Northern Arizona University as a freshman. And anybody who knows Flagstaff, it's a pretty outdoorsy town. Everybody I met as soon as I arrived at college was a rock climber or a runner or a whitewater kayaker or a cyclist. And if you weren't any of those things, you were really bored. And you were probably going to transfer to U of A or ASU or go somewhere else, because it's definitely, it's a place that's just infused with the outdoors. And I was still smoking until I got my first mountain bike, and that was actually the very start of positive change in my life when it came to bikes. Because I realized very quickly when I was trying to ride uphill at 7,000 feet in elevation that smoking and cycling could not coexist. That was also the start of me saying yes to this sport and this hobby being important enough to make those decisions. So I got my first mountain bike. The first year was a complete and total baptism by fire. I had no idea what I was doing. The picture on the left is me with my very first mountain bike, my first real mountain bike on my first ride with my friend Brooke, who I credit with getting me into the sport. And the second picture is me holding on for dear life. I got thrown into a race in the desert of Arizona and had really no idea what I was doing, but I had fallen into the NAU cycling crowd, and they were grooming me for collegiate nationals. So I had to get out there. I'm wearing a jersey that's like 3 times too big for me because I borrowed it from one of the guys. And then the third picture is from spring break in Moab, where those guys who were like very well-rounded, accomplished, fast mountain bikers just kind of took me all over the place, and I crashed, and I didn't know how to eat or hydrate. I didn't know anything about anything, and looking back on it, I wonder how I ever stuck with it. But it also paved the way for me to make it an easier sport to get into for other people. So that was definitely a big part of my introduction. It was kind of tough. But I persevered, and by 2002, I had found my groove and was all in. You know, cycling was really like a big part of my life. I started working my way through the ranks of cross-country mountain bike racing, and by 2002 I was doing national races. This is my first national race in Durango, Colorado. I was an expert, or it would be Cat 1 now at the time. And the picture on the right is from a mountain bike marathon in Las Vegas. So I'm starting to branch out, I'm starting to travel a little bit more and figure out what this sport is all about. And then by 2006, I was doing a full calendar of mountain and road events, including national races, and maybe 20 to 25 starts a year. With all the travel is actually quite a lot. By this point, I was a pro level rider and a Cat 2 on the road, but that doesn't mean I was getting paid. It's worth clarifying that pro on the mountain is a category, it's not a designation. So if you get to be above expert or Cat 1, which is what it's called now, you just go to the pro category. So I still had a full-time job. I was working and traveling and racing and found myself very, very busy. But the nice thing about this period was I had met the goal I had set for myself, which was to ride at that level. And I'd proven to myself that I could do it. The time, the dedication, the commitment to training, working with a coach, all of that stuff had come together, and it was working. But there was a lot of sacrifices that needed to be made in order to continue to travel and train that way. So I was really starting to evaluate how far I wanted to go. And then in 2009, I didn't have to think about it too much more because my husband got a job in Hawaii, and we took the leap to the middle of the Pacific and landed on a literal island. And this was kind of an exciting change in my life because it extracted me from this very complex, robust cycling network in Arizona, and which had a huge depth of field, and replaced it with a very small community that was pretty insular. So the races were small, and I would show up and really have no competition, and it forced this reevaluation of why I was doing this. Like, if there was no one to race, why do I do this? So that was a really nice turning point, and it caused me to break out and try other things. I started mountain biking on the water, which is how I refer to surfing, because it's basically the same thing. And I love it. It's an amazing sport. And I also did my yoga teacher training at this time and fell back in love with mountain biking and road riding at the same time for different reasons. I also even dabbled in off-road triathlon, which is a closely guarded secret. The closely guarded secret being that I actually thought it was really fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it tremendously. I loved the variety in my training. I loved swimming in the ocean, and I got to do the World Championship race on Maui. So that was a really great thing I had the opportunity to do. And if you're a triathlete or you're interested in triathlon, Hawaii is the place to do it. The water is always 82 degrees and you don't need a wetsuit, and it is definitely the place. It's a lot better than swimming in the Hudson. But the really great thing that happened as I kind of look back on this timeline is a shift away from prioritizing my own athletic pursuits to really wanting to cultivate the athletic pursuits of others. And I started coaching more. I started working for an endurance coaching company on Oahu that was training people for the Honu Half Ironman race on the Big Island, and I was their head bike coach. So I got to work with 25 to 30 athletes from start to finish on their training program, and I found it really gratifying. Really kind of, it deepened my connection to the sport, and it really helped me to understand why I did it by seeing these advances in other people's riding. It was just really fun. And I also taught mountain bike skills because there are a lot of triathletes in Hawaii who wanted to do Xterra but were limited by the mountain biking portion. So a lot of the people I worked with there were established triathletes on the road that were looking to translate that to Xterra. And then in 2013, another big giant leap to the other side of the country. I landed in New York City with my husband, and I started working at Bicycle Habitat in Soho. And this was, this picture is from a large women's ride with the Specialized Lululemon Pro team. Bicycle Habitat was hosting it. This was during the era of Evelyn Stevens, who's, if you guys know who she is, she's a local hometown hero. She came up through the Central Park races and used to work on Wall Street, and within 3 years was winning pro level races internationally. And so she was there, so it drew this huge crowd. And one of my first jobs at Bicycle Habitat was to put on a jersey and go take pictures of this ride. And this was a really eye-opening moment for me because I never realized that there could be 70 women on bikes together at the same time on a Thursday. And that was another like reframing, refocusing moment where I really expanded what was possible, just due to being in New York, having a brand new community. The cultural norms were different, the etiquette was different, the racing was different, everything was changing all over again. And I was really into it. I was really into like learning and adapting to this new New York City life. which led me to start to work on a project to integrate this momentum that was building in women's cycling into the local bike shop. And in 2015, or actually it was in late 2014, not long after Anna Maria launched Pretty Damn Fast, I went to the owner of Bicycle Habitat, Charlie McCorkle, with an idea to start a women's cycling program, and he said yes. So I put my head together with Emily Samstag, who also works at the shop, and we created this program called Bicycle Habitat Women's Cycling, or Women's Cycling NYC. And amazing things have happened since. For those of you who don't know what this program is, it is a comprehensive program designed to grow women's participation in cycling around the local bike shop. So it's mostly education-based, but there are recurring weekly rides that happen in Central Park and Prospect Park. We do rides over the bridge, we do large events, we do in-store clinics and mountain bike rides. But the big portion of that's kind of the meat and potatoes of it, is the integration with the bike shop. Because what made this program different from all of the ambassador programs that was out there and all of these large women's rides that were just kind of floating around in the community is I wanted to anchor it to the local bike shop, which I felt was the backbone of the community. Because if you have a really large women's ride that's sponsored by brand X and people fall in love with this cool bike, they still have to go navigate this weird, sometimes complicated world of local bike shops. So I wanted to make the bike shop more friendly, more inviting, and have the right products for women, work with the brands, work with the players, all these different companies to make sure that women were getting recognized and that women in New York City felt like they had a home base. The goal being to support that entire life cycle of bike life. So if you're a woman and you want to get into cycling, which I assume a lot of you here have been in this position, I wanted to support the bike purchase, to the equipment that you needed, to learning to ride the bike, to finding your friends and building community, to then getting get fit properly to your bike, to doing an annual tune-up, then doing it all over again as you find your place. So if you decide after you get that first bike that you really want to race and you want to go do CRCA and you need a carbon road bike with all the bells and whistles, that would be the way you would go. But if you decide, yeah, maybe I'm going to dabble in off-road, maybe I want a gravel bike or a cross bike, like we would be there to guide you through that, and it's like this whole mentoring program. I need to point out that I did not do this by myself. I have a really great team of ride leaders and ambassadors, and this picture on the right is a few of those people who've really given their time and energy and love to make this happen, like Emily Samstag and Lisa Mazzola, Blythe Austin, Jeannie Meyer, and the list goes on. The other really cool thing that happened as a result of this program is I got to see it go national. So it did become the model for Trek's Advocate program that launched in 2016. And it basically took what we were doing in New York and expanded it throughout the entire United States and Canada. So Emily and I got to go to the inaugural Trek Women's Summit last year and give a presentation on how to start a women's cycling community with best practices and lessons learned. But most importantly, how to do that and integrate it with your local bike shop. To me, that was the ultimate disconnect. Like, the women's movement was not connected, was not working with the bike shops, you know, and some of those personalities and intricacies and you know, layers that go with it. So bringing the shop into the fold, I feel, provided women with a lot more resources and gave them the ability to take true ownership over their cycling experience. So then, with all of this group programming well established, it had me thinking, what's next? And I've been a coach for a while, and I love being a coach, and it was over a few long rides with fellow women's cycling ride leader, Lisa Mazzola, who's pictured here on the left, and she's also here. Hi, Lisa. We decided that we wanted to provide the opportunities for women who are coming up through this program, who are hungry for more knowledge, to spread their wings and really find themselves in the sport. We felt like there's only so much personal growth that can happen in the group setting. There's tremendous value in it, in that community, but if you're going to really make this a sport that's personal to you and actually like can transform every aspect of your life, it really needs to be done one-on-one. So that's what Lisa and I put our heads together and launched Art of Cycling as a result. I know I never would have made it as far as I did in the sport without a coach. So that's really what we're trying to give back now through this program. And that cycling as a form of art is our motto. It's on the back of the t-shirt we're holding up here. And I think it speaks for itself. And like art, everyone seems to have their own interpretation of what that means, and I love that. I love that cycling as a form of art can mean so many things, and everyone can sort of figure out what that is for them. But what it means to me is that as you progress in the sport, it can and will become an act of self-expression. And so how that works for you is going to be different for everyone. But I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to witness in other people. And just real quick, I'll tell you what we do. We are personal coaches, so we help people through the entire process of training for an event, whatever that event or series of events, or maybe it's a trip to the Alps, or whatever it is, with the training metrics side, so the science, and then a creative, thoughtful side, where we figure out kind of what makes that person tick, and write a program that integrates into their lives so that they can achieve their goals and really exceed what they think is possible. We do group coaching, like this middle top picture is from the OutdoorFest mountain bike day that we were very fortunate to be a part of. We do private skills instruction for people who want to learn on the bike skills, and then we're also yoga teachers with an emphasis on yoga for cyclists. In particular, like yoga for athletic recovery and gentle yoga in order to sort of work out any kinks in the body. But all of these things, with Bicycle Habitat Women's Cycling and with Art of Cycling, the idea is to shorten the learning curve, take the sting out of learning to ride a bike, and knowing what those elements are to the learning curve, what those obstacles are, can be enlightening. So that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about the illustrious learning curve.
So it all starts with equipment, and it's a huge expense no matter where you're starting, and it can be overwhelming. And for whether you're buying your first road bike or even your first commuter bike, it's really hard, and you get so much advice and so much bad advice, and advice kind of coming from every different direction. And like Kristen was saying, kind of anchoring women's programming in the store starts to make a safe place for you to get more informed, get better opinions, learn more firsthand, and see some of the equipment in use. When I first started road riding, I actually set up a budget for myself, and what I would have spent on the gym, or what I would have spent on my subway commute, started going towards the bike stuff that I needed, because I needed all of it. I didn't even have any kind of athletic apparel from another sport that I could bring over. So it was an overwhelming, huge expense. But I think that you and I were talking about how there are kind of two routes into that initial bike purchase.
Yeah, there are two ways to look at it when you're trying to buy your first bike or get that first piece of expensive gear. And really you can go two ways. You can get the bare minimum to just get it done because you just need a bike. You can't ride without a bike, so just get a bike. And when I first started, that's what I did. I bought the bike I could afford, which wasn't a very expensive bike, but I didn't have any money, so I was just like, I just gotta get a bike. And then I promptly started upgrading absolutely everything. And my husband is laughing because I had the most tricked out bike. It was like a really cheap frame with really expensive parts because I just had to have this, I realized the limitations of every single part on that bike as soon as I bought it. And yeah, when he saw my bike, he was like, we need to get you a new frame. And really everything just went on this new frame. But that's the curse of the upgrade, as I like to refer to it, and that's totally fine. Get what you can get, start riding the crap out of it, but realize that maybe within a year or two you might be buying a new bike. Or you can do it the other way, which is how I do it now. At this point in my life, I buy bikes that I need to grow into. So you can get the bike for the rider you want to be. And there's something very humbling and very inspiring about looking at a beautiful machine you don't feel worthy of. And you have to go out there and prove it to yourself and to the bike that you should have it. And that works for me. I think either way is correct. There's no right or wrong way to do it. As Anna Maria said when we were talking about this, whatever you want is the correct purchase. Like whatever you feel is going to be best for you. If it is to get a more expensive bike up front because you don't want to worry about upgrading it later, that's the right answer. And if you just need to get something cheap off Craigslist because you don't have anything at all, that's the right answer too.
And then the one other thing that seemed particularly unfair to me is that in cycling you can really buy performance, and there are very real limits to your equipment. And I think that I've seen this most in mountain biking, where somebody is trying to get over an obstacle, trying to session a particularly tricky part of the trail, and it really literally is their equipment that's holding them back. And you trade bikes, and all of a sudden they can get over that log. And the important thing is start riding, but know that that these are valuable investments. This is an investment in your sport, and every dollar that you put into the bike comes back to you tenfold. I actually could have picked a million pictures for the fear slide because in all the beginning pictures introducing me, I was scared in all of them. I mean, I was scared on my first commuter bike. I was scared trying to race. I was scared riding in a group. Like the fear part was never not present when I started riding, and is something that is a very real part of my cycling life every day. But I think for me, what I got out of so much from confronting that fear was, I guess it's a little bit hard to put into words, but I think that we, especially in New York, oftentimes have gotten here by singularly pursuing one thing that we are really, really good at, to the detriment of all other things. We focus on only what we're good at and don't really extend ourselves into things that we're really not really great at. And in my case, I'm not great at riding bikes. This was not anything that came naturally to me, except I just loved it, and so I had to keep powering through this fear over and over and over again, and little by little I gained more confidence, and felt stronger, and the things that totally terrified me became not so terrifying, and then I took on new challenges. And I mean, if you told me 10 years ago that I'd ride downhill mountain bike, I would not have believed you, but it was all these incremental confrontations of fear and getting back up on the bike when it seemed like the hardest thing to do ever. And you learn that you can fall and you can take a tumble. And in my case, I got hit by a car, and it was terrifying to get back on a bike, but my life is so much better because I did.
And I think one of the best ways to move past the fear is through skill, through acquiring the confidence in order to safely ride your bike, so you know that you have like a reasonable assurance, at least in your own abilities. That gives you a tremendous amount of confidence when it comes to going out on group rides, riding with other people, riding in traffic. Skill is a broad topic. I made this list in order to sort of give you a sense of what skill can encompass. The idea behind it being like, what makes up an accomplished rider? That term, like, this person's an accomplished cyclist. What does that actually mean? Like, how many different elements of the sport need to come together in order to create that depth of experience that allows someone to be accomplished, to be really like have ownership, complete and total ownership of the sport. And looking at this list, I think everyone in here can pick out something they're naturally good at, or something that they've spent the time becoming good at on the bike. And there's probably things on this list you need to work on. So just identifying what those things are can help you learn what you need to know in order to progress in the sport, because a lot of people start out in cycling and they don't even know what they need to know. So there's just a lot of different elements to it. The best advice I have is to go with what interests you, go develop your strengths, and also figure out what's your weak in and work on that as well. It just adds to this vocabulary and this depth that just translates to everything else. Like, knowing how to work on your bike is really great for group riding, because you might need to fix a mechanical someday, and everything sort of relates to each other. The whole goal being like to just take ownership of it and figure out where the classes are, where the YouTube videos are, the people in the community that you respect who can give you good advice, and go seek it out.
And there's just something incredibly valuable about pursuing skills that is sort of beyond acquiring the skill itself. So maybe you'll never work on your bike, but going through the process of at least learning how to do it is definitely worth more than just the flat fix. That acquiring these skills, no matter how you put them together in the way that you end up riding, the mastery and the practice in itself is, it's just really valuable.
Just one other comment: if you ever hear anybody say the phrase, "it's just like riding a bike," that's such a pet peeve of mine, because it really takes away from all these complex, very nuanced skills that everybody needs to ride a bike. And there's no such thing. Like, riding a bike is a very complicated thing, and it's not just like riding a bike. Cumulative effects of all of that knowledge that you acquire, that turns into this really beautiful thing where you can enjoy the sport a lot more when you're confident. You can make it a practice. It almost becomes meditative when you can get in the rhythm and the flow of it, because you've graduated beyond thinking about every decision you're making on the bike to making a lot of that automatic, so you can start thinking about other things. You can start really stopping thinking while you're riding your bike, and that to me is really where the magic is. That's where the art is in the whole approach to this process. It becomes this release and this way to escape the demands of daily life. The more time you put in, the more it gives back.
And just sort of lastly on this, cycling is something that you can have for the rest of your life. And the cyclist you are now will evolve into the cyclist you will be in a few years. And hopefully we'll all be riding bikes when we're 90 years old. It can be as much or little of your part of your life as you want it to be. And it can seamlessly integrate with so many elements of your life. So,
this is the word we want to leave you with. This is the word that kept coming up when we were talking about this presentation, because it really is what it takes to become a cyclist, to stick with it, to grow with it, to evolve with it personally and athletically and wherever you decide to go with it. Tenacity just being the quality of your disposition as it relates to being a cyclist. One of the things I tell beginner mountain bikers is that this sport will constantly ask you how much you want to do it. And there's like an immediate moment where like you fall and hit the ground and the sport goes, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And that's where I was 18 years ago. And now it's still asking me how much I want to do it as I try to cram 9 bikes into a 1-bedroom apartment. Like, there's never a point where the sport is easy, and that's just the truth. But it is the most beautiful and the best sport in the world, and I hope that this presentation was enough to give you guys a little bit of motivation and inspiration there.